right, good morning. Welcome to episode 2 of the In Search of Sovereignty podcast. Today's guest is Carly Rose, cordial drinking, frequency slinging, biohacking extraordinaire, from what I hear. Welcome, Carly. Thank you for coming on the show.
Oh my gosh, thank you. That was the best intro I've ever had.
Awesome. I'm glad. So I wanted to kind of introduce the idea of sovereignty a little bit before we get going into the podcast, and just kind of like what my goal is for the show, and for my guests and everything, which is kind of just talking about the concept generally of sovereignty as the idea of basically taking self-sufficiency and applying that to all areas of your life. So not just homesteading and permaculture and raising chickens and things like that, but also stuff like quantum health and economics and finance and kind of across the board. So that's sort of the purpose of this podcast. And on today's show, we're going to talk about all kinds of things: quantum health and quantum biology and circadian rhythm and trauma and frequency and all kinds of stuff. I'm really excited to get into it. So with that, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself and go ahead and give the audience an idea of who you are and what you do, what you specialize in, and what you're passionate about.
Yeah. So, I've shifted all over the place with my interest, but it's always been with the pursuit of truth and the pursuit of holistic health. So for a while that meant veganism and raw veganism. Then that turned into permaculture and veganism. And then that turned into regenerative farming and leaving veganism after 8 years. But gratitude for that path of teaching me all about how powerful the human body is. And I worked at a juice bar for a long time and would just witness people come in and get a juice cleanse, and after the juice cleanse, they didn't have to wear glasses, and they didn't have psoriasis, and they didn't have certain things. So I started to look into different types of way the body loves to heal itself. And that was just like when I was 15 years old. So from there, I really started looking into what is in our tap water. Like, what are these things that they're just handing out, like pills over the counter, and like, what's the long-term effect? How are they interacting with each other? So also being around a lot of people that were injured by the conventional medicine system was a real big wake-up call for me. So storytelling is a big part of my journey, and I love sharing my story with other people, and I love hearing other people's stories of where they've come from and like how they get to this place of sovereignty and truth. And I think a lot of us get here because we've gone through something pretty powerful. And for me, that was like just a history of, like I said, veganism and eating disorders and being put on birth control. And I actually wasn't even on it for a long time, because that was when I started my spiritual journey and had my body just completely rejected it. So I was really grateful for that.
It saved you some heartache, I'm sure.
Yeah, like, oh my gosh, but it's part of it, and a lot of people are having that wake up call from the birth control pill industry right now, which I love seeing that trending on Instagram of all these people. Like the other day I was at a cafe and someone came up to me and they're like, I saw your Instagram post about birth control and I got off of it. And I'm just finally feeling myself again. Or, people say all sorts of things about, just whether it's cutting out tap water or cutting out birth control pills or cutting out seed oils. I mean, all these things have such a significant impact on our health. So really quick to wrap that up, like, I really just went on this long journey of health and seeking truth. And it's led me to this space right now of quantum health and permaculture, regenerative farming, raising my own animals, leveraged income, how to make money that's not like slowly killing you. It's also interconnected. And I feel like that is where a lot of people are ending up right now after seeking truth, especially over the past few years.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. It's interesting that you said that you were vegan for 8 years.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. What caused you to, what was your inspiration for coming out of veganism?
Well, I was living in Hawaii at the time, and I just started having dreams of eggs. And I had noticed a lot of people leaving veganism. And I also was just like, in Hawaii, everything's imported. So I was like eating this vegan protein powder that was being like shipped from all over the world to this manufacturing facility in Florida. And then it was being shipped all the way to Hawaii versus just, I was living on a permaculture and there were eggs everywhere from all of the animals. So I kind of
Right.
just had that moment in my head click, and I thought, this just isn't right. And I was so dogmatic about veganism. I mean, I was a protester. I was talking about on Instagram. My entire Instagram was from veganism. So honestly, it was really scary to leave veganism. And,
Yeah.
but then I started, that path of seeking truth. And I realized, wait, how come like all young girls are being marketed veganism, like young, fertile women? What is that?
Yeah.
And I just really recognize that a lot of women, especially, I mean, men too, but women especially are all targeted for veganism, and it makes them infertile, makes you lose your hair, your teeth get fucked up. Like, it's just, oh my gosh. And so I just really, once I saw like the information about like eating meat, organ meats, raw milk, cutting out seed oils, not eating rancid nuts, I just couldn't turn a blind eye, and it resonated with me so deeply. And honestly, I feel that, you know, but beyond like scientific studies and data and all these things that people can say about anything these days, you really have to go to like what your body feels is truth, and what like that extra sense of resonance. And I just watched a podcast, or I saw a little clip of this the other day. I can't remember the man who was talking about it, but it's like, yeah, when you feel things that are in resonance, like your body is having like major sensation of what is right for you. And so just looking into bioindividuality and lineage and ancestry, I was just like, wait, this makes no sense why I'm vegan. It's like literally no sense at all. So it
Yeah.
kind of helped me get out of that. And my body is like happier than ever. It's incredible how much my body has changed since incorporating animal products again.
That's awesome. I feel like that's a great, testimony towards investigating more of the like ancestral and animal-based type eating again. And I had a similar kind of, I wasn't vegan, but I had a similar sort of awakening experience where I actually got a parasite from eating raw sushi. Like I was one of those people who actually got one
Mm,
from a sushi place from raw fish.
mm,
And it wrecked my gut health, like completely wrecked
mm,
my microbiome. And I had no idea how to like restore that, how to heal myself again. And that actually is what sent me kind of like down the rabbit hole on nutrition and health in general, and
mm,
researching things like soil health and the nutritional density of foods, and things like how just eating a ton of raw vegetables isn't actually as good for your gut as people think that it is. And
mhm.
that's what introduced me to like Weston A. Price and his
Yeah.
research, and reading like Nourishing Traditions. And
Mhm,
that just
mhm.
changed my life completely. I went and I bought
Totally.
my first like half gallon of raw milk after reading that book, and I've like never gone back. I'm literally drinking some coffee right now. Oh, you can't see it. That has raw milk in it, because it's like
Mhm.
it's become a daily ritual. It's like
Oh, totally. Yeah.
I'll never go back. And I feel
Yeah.
like, like you said, once you start to see some of the realizable like health benefits and changes that come from changing to the more like nutritionally dense foods, that the real nutritionally dense foods,
Mm.
you can't, like, it's irreversible, you don't ever want to go back.
Absolutely. And it's like, why the fuck is raw milk illegal in places? Like,
Yeah.
that's
I
just,
know.
and that was really like, that made me feel in my body that resonance, like, ooh, I need some of that. I need
Hmm.
to drink that. And so, yeah, now I love how it's just undeniable how amazing it is for our health.
Yeah.
And people are doing all sorts of things to get it in their hands. So,
Hmm.
even if it's pet grade or whatever you want to call it. So
Yeah.
I love
Pet milk.
drinking raw milk. Yeah, it has definitely like, I just see what it's doing for people, especially after like coming from like, dealing with parasites or poor gut health or poor hormonal health. And yeah, it just makes sense. And a lot of people find this information now. A lot of people are homesteading and
Hmm.
producing their own milk, and
Right.
or linking up with their local farmers when they hadn't done that in the past. So it's
Yeah.
really just like a returning home.
Yeah, totally. Completely agree. I mean, I have a raw milk vendor locally at my farmer's market that I'm part of their like herd share, and that's where I get my milk from. And I was
Mm,
just reflecting recently about how, the general sort of attitude and temperature about raw milk in like the popular media and mainstream media and stuff would make you believe that it's this like it's this substance that'll make you super sick, and that it's like, super unreliable compared to industrialized pasteurized milk, and how it makes you think that it's just something that like, crunchy people do, and that it's hard to find, and that it's like, kind of a subculture type thing. But when I go to the farmer's market, there are people literally lined up when it opens at 10 a.m. or 8 a.m. starting for the summer. And
Mhm.
the milk is sold out within like 15 minutes, because
Totally.
like hundreds of people locally recognize, the value of nutritionally dense, like local foods. And it's like, once you go and you
100%.
see that, and you realize that like that type of stuff is available at like the local community level, it causes you to realize that like what you've been fed and what you've seen is just wrong at the like, national media level.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. I mean, if people are still trusting the news about raw milk, I don't know. Like you got
or
some
or anything.
or anything,
Right.
like you've got some unconditioning to do. I mean, yeah, it's like logically speaking, our ancestors thrived off of raw milk, pastured eggs, organ meats. So I think that really just it all comes back to, there's a study for anything, this for anything, blah blah blah, but when it comes back to logic, like what makes sense, we thrived off of that for a very long time. And
Right.
so it's actually funny because I since stepping back into like or stepping returning to ancestral eating, because I wasn't really raised with it. I was raised eating meat, but in the conventional way. But coming now to regenerative and raw milk, I mean, I have like had to cut out all the like I wouldn't say all the supplements, because I do shilajit, and I love to like work with herbs and herbalism, like make my own little things, and I'll take some type of supplement. But it's funny how much I've had to cut out. Well, it's amazing how much I've had to cut out or could cut out after just like simply reintroducing nutrient dense foods.
Right.
And that's another thing, the holistic health industry is amazing for so many reasons, but also it can be very corrupt and
Hmm.
not reliable. And so it's a lot of outsourcing your health versus working with your body's innate wisdom and frequency. And so that being said, I just love that a lot of my nutrients now, instead of worrying about am I getting enough nutrients, I can really just like know that, wow, I'm taking beef liver, and I know that it's a multivitamin, and I can eat things with vitamin E versus just constantly being in the state of lack and needing to outsource. And that's something I've really learned with like this ancestral movement is I think a lot in any other types of diets, like veganism. Oh my gosh, you got to supplement this and this and this and this to make sure you're okay. And I just didn't like that aspect of it, because it's like, well, if it's so hard to do, maybe that's a sign that we shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. I've felt like one of the best arguments against veganism that I can think of is that if you have to like supplement so many nutrients in order to make sure that you're getting all of the micronutrients and things that your body actually needs, it's probably a sign that that's not the right kind of diet for you. Like
Yeah,
if you like literally can't get everything you need just from the food that you're eating, then it's probably not, a good
a
diet.
hundred
So
percent. Yeah.
yeah, I was the same way actually. I used to take a ton of vitamins. I had like a whole stack of them. I was taking like 8 or 9 different supplements a day, including like a food-based multivitamin that was like it's that brand Mega Food. So it was based off of like vegetables and things, which
Yeah.
is like, it's a good high quality vitamin, but it's like, for example, like the vitamin A that's in that is the beta carotene version of vitamin A. It's not the retinol version, which you can only get from like organs and
Mm.
animal based
Hmm. Yeah.
food sources. So it was like, it's still limited, and you're still not going to be able to get everything that you need. And I've like completely stopped taking those now that I've incorporated organ meats and raw milk and like butter, like local butter into my diet, which is
Mm.
another kind of like piece of the Weston A. Price stuff, as he talks about. And which I like. I'll put that in the show notes for this episode of that book, Nourishing Traditions, because it's
Yeah.
definitely worth reading. I've recommended it to so many people. To really start thinking about the food industry in a slightly different way, with some of the stuff that, some of the research that she showed about like the butter industry, for example, and how it was like it's much less profitable for you to use butter than it is for them to sell you seed oils and margarine and things like that. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
food is a
Yeah.
revolution.
And going off of that, in terms of like all the quantum health things, which quantum health, in my opinion, is just like utilizing the sun and the earth to ground, and all of the hormonal and like mitochondrial impacts that these natural frequencies have on our health. And like, I know we'll get into that, but in regards to food and quantum health, so I have this friend named Kira, and she's like really big into quantum health. And she was talking about how food, it's like actually a barcode. So like if I'm in, let's say I am in California, and Northern California, and it's really cold and snowy, and if I'm eating a mango, it's actually registering to my body like, oh, you're in this location, so it's actually providing different functions in your body.
Right.
And so, for example, when a lot of people get sunburnt, it's because like whether their diet is not in resonance with the sun in their area, or like they're not getting outside in the proper nutrients from the sun in order to build up that melanin in your skin. And I was actually I follow this woman, Stephanie, and she was talking about how her husband's like super Irish, would always get burned. And then he started going outside for sunrise. So, it's signaling to your body, hey, it's time to wake up. There's a bunch of processes that happen when you watch sunrise, like you get photons in your retina. It helps with like DHA absorption and hormone function. It's just like a signal, like a complete light signal. Hey, wake up. Like your body's starting to do some things. Like, let's go. And then we get blue light at mid-noon, and then you get sunrise, and that also triggers to your brain, okay, it's time to go to bed. Your body starts winding down. So like your cortisol is totally shifting throughout that entire process. And like cortisol is not always bad, of course. Like it has its place throughout the day to give you energy. And so that being said, it's like going back to the story of the man that was sunburnt. So, he was just starting to wake up, watch the sunrise, eat more locally to where he was living, because that was directly related to the sun exposure the plants are getting, what he's consuming, and also the animals. And his sunburn is like gone, and he's not doing sunglasses at all. And that's also another thing
Nice.
that people are waking up to, like not wearing sunglasses, because it's literally blocking sun exposure from getting in your eye. And then, so like they're selling you sunglasses, and then they're selling you sunscreen after that to prevent the burn that the sunglasses is, causing, or what the diet is causing from the sunburn. So it's been a really interesting like rabbit hole to dive into, just like how blue light and red light and the sun are really just these major markers of light signal and hormone signals for our day. And I'm like super into seed oils and like not eating them and not drinking tap water. But I'm also noticing how I really just kind of bypassed the whole like lighting aspect of the earth. And now I'm just like, wait a minute, like our ancestors were not exposed to artificial light. Like this is
Mm-mm.
something very new. So diving into that has been really eye-opening, and my body has had an almost immediate response, amazing response to cutting out a lot of artificial light.
Yeah, that's I think a really key thing that a lot of people have not thought of as a part of health until very recently, which is funny because, like you said, it's like we have artificial lights and things like non-native EMFs and things are very new to our existence on the planet, and it really makes sense to me when you think about how humans, and whether whether you believe that there's a like an intelligent creative force, or if you believe that it was just pure evolution or some combination of the two, which is what I tend to lean towards. But wherever you fall on the spectrum, it makes complete sense that we have evolved in conjunction with this planet to receive and adapt to the signals that it sends in the sun and also from the earth, and everything. And so it makes complete sense that our daily bodily functions would be very intimately tied to the wavelength of light that's in the atmosphere at a given time of day, or the frequency of the earth, given the fact that we literally used to sleep on the ground and walked barefoot everywhere. It makes complete sense that
Mm,
we would have like a really strong reaction to that kind of stuff. And it was actually for me learning more about natural vitamin D production and synthesis that led me to getting so much more into the circadian rhythm and light frequency stuff, because I literally did not know. I think most people probably don't either, that you can only produce and synthesize vitamin D when the sun is above 35 degrees over the horizon.
mhm,
And how
mhm,
like any other time of day, which during the summertime is like most of the day, but during other times of year, there are going to be times of day when you're out in the sun when you're not actually getting vitamin D. So that, that whole idea of like, I'm going to go outside and get my vitamin D. Well, not necessarily, depending on the time of day that it is. And the whole
Mm,
idea, of how protective not vitamin A, but how protective UVA light is, and how, it's like what causes your body to start producing that protective melatonin, which is what gives you the ability to not be able to sunburn as easily. But all of that is dependent upon, like you said, having enough like magnesium and vitamin A in your diet to be able to synthesize that, which you're only going to be getting seasonally appropriate food. You're only going to be getting it from seasonally appropriate food if you're actually eating, the right diet. So it is really interesting how it's all interconnected, and it sounds like a lot. Like it sounds like it's like, oh my gosh, how could I possibly keep track of like what time of day it is, what frequency of light is present, what food I'm
mhm.
able to get locally, and making sure that I ground all the time. But it really, like, just think of it from the perspective of like, this makes sense, for
Totally.
your body and for your ancestors and for the way that we've evolved. Like it just, lean into that resonance, like you said, of like it actually feels right when you're doing these things.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, it's just very, again, that logic of, okay, like sunrise, that was a signal to wake us up instead of a like awful frequency alarm clock, and like what that does to your nervous system with that meh,
Yeah.
meh,
Oof.
meh. I mean,
Yeah.
gosh, the way that I remember even just in high school, like waking up to that when it was pitch black. And even if you think of the classic 9 to 5 job, you wake up, it's still dark out, you wake up with your awful alarm. First thing you do is check your phone, that you probably, the average person doesn't have a blue light blocker on.
Right.
So they're getting that blue light exposure first thing in the morning, which is the blue light signaling to your body, oh my gosh, it's noon. So that
Right.
increases your cortisol, and they're running on cortisol. Then they have coffee, caffeine, they're fasted, they get to work under artificial lighting. Maybe they miss the sunrise, depending on where they are, what season, like during winter, for sure, probably.
Hmm.
And then working all day under artificial light, staring at blue light. You get home maybe before sunset, most likely, but then you get a little bit of that sunset or outdoor time. Most people probably don't take that. Like the conventional Americans do not. They go home, watch
Right.
more blue light on their TV, frequency, like bad frequencies in their ears with music, or poor choices of music, I should say, eating shitty food, seed oils, then going to bed and like needing to take something in order to go to bed, staring at their phone. And
Right.
so, like, not once have they got outside and grounded their feet. And like, I have been enjoying looking into like what that does to our body, like creating structured water in our body through like the electrons of the earth. And like, now my goal is just to like try to ground my feet as often as I can outside and get sunlight as much as I can.
Hmm.
But really just for sure prioritizing sunrise and sunset. And then every like couple hours, like I work from home, so I try to get outside. And yeah, just like the typical work, like dollar per hour model, go to work, all the things, what they train us to do in high school and college, like that is just not parallel to the spirit of being a human.
Yeah.
And it's very obvious when you dive into quantum health and like how we should be living, that it's the way that, like, why are people so depressed and sick? It's because we're just not living in alignment at all. Like you work a job where you like are under all this stress, all this shitty food, all this lighting, you're not even getting paid a lot, and you're replaceable because maybe you hate your boss, and that like increases cortisol whenever you go to work. And then it's
Yeah.
like, you're not touching the grounds once with your bare foot or eating anything at the peak of ripeness because you don't know how. And so
Right.
I think, like, that being said, like, I'm not trying to point fingers at anyone, but I'm just trying to like showcase how crazy it is. Like, it's actually nuts. It's not normal, but it's normalized. So I feel like what I love to do is like give people digestible information that they can incorporate into their life, that's not intimidating and not like super stressful. It's like just little things to weave in so they can really feel a significant effect, by just living more in tune with their bodies and this earth.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, and in the example of the person who wakes up and then goes outside, gets in their car, drives to work, gets to work, works under artificial lights all day. and then gets back in their car, drives home, and then goes back under artificial lights as soon as they get home. In that example, the only times that you're outside is when you're in your car, either on the way to it or on the way back inside from your car, where you're sitting in a box that has tinted windows and you're probably
Yeah.
wearing sunglasses. It's
Yeah.
like you literally have like no sun exposure. You're basically like plastic wrapping yourself at all times to make sure that you
Mhm.
are,
Mhm.
not being influenced by nature at all. It's crazy. It
Mm.
really is. It's
Yeah.
when you talk about it that way, and you lay it out like that, it really does sound insane, and how disconnected most people really are from just like the
Mhm.
natural rhythm of things. And um yeah, I've also been trying lately to get outside as often as possible and to take light breaks and just be barefoot on the
Mm.
ground, and also to wear like natural fibers and materials too, so that like if I'm sitting on the ground, I'm not wearing like polyester pants that are like blocking the
Right.
exchange of electrons, which is also just so crazy, just like the
Yeah.
number of ways the from like being attacked from like all angles of like basically trying
Mhm.
to block
Mhm.
you from reconnection in every way possible.
For sure. Well, first of all, like we're on the exact same page about like all of this, and I just love it
Yes.
because I was just gonna say, that's also another thing that I did was like completely get rid of all polyester in my closet. And I'm a
Mhm.
very like I don't know if you've ever done like the Enneagram personality test,
Yeah,
but
I have.
yeah, what are you?
I'm an 8 wing 3.
Okay, I'm one, which is a perfectionist. So, and I'm also a Gemini. So I tend to get very like I get if I want something, I want it and I need it now and I'm going to do it.
Mhm.
So, when I was vegan, I was vegan. When I was a minimalist, I was zero waste minimalist, no plastic, like very two plates, like five shirts, like all the things.
Yeah.
And then now I'm like very of course like getting back to the earth and which like actually is like the truth, which makes sense, but what I wanted to say was when I switched all my clothes to natural fibers and got rid of all the polyester in my clothes, in my closet. And oh my gosh, because I've always been into thrifting. Like I love sustainability, love just doing what's best for the planet. And so started thrifting like over like 12, 13 years ago. And I really literally never buy anything brand new. Like it's pretty rare. Um, Unless it's like a natural fiber, like small business that I love,
Mhm.
like a great company. But I was thrifting a lot, but thrifting a lot of polyester. So I just got rid of everything. And also like that process of letting clothes go. Clothes hold so much memory and it feels so good to get rid of things, even if you love it so much, but it brings up this like old version of yourself. I
Yeah.
always am doing that and decluttering, and like holding clothes and being like, okay, I love this. Like my ego loves it, but actually, how is it impacting me on a subconscious level because it's linked to certain things I experienced? So I love that shit and I like get rid of it or I love the experience of that
Yeah.
and I get rid of the clothes. But yeah, thrifting like now natural fibers. I mean, it can be really inexpensive. So for anyone that's looking to just transition their closet over to natural fibers, it doesn't have to be a thing that's like costing you thousands of dollars. I mean, you
Right.
can thrift cashmere from Goodwill for $5.
Yeah, I mean, thrifting is a great source of a lot of that stuff, and depending on, where you live and the type of market that you have, you might be able to find things like linen pants, for example, and stuff like that at your local Goodwill. So it's definitely a good source for that. And I'm like you
Yeah.
as well, where I've been trying to slowly, exchange out all of my clothes for cotton, typically just like natural
Mm,
fibers in general. And like I was wearing, a lot of like workout leggings, for example, that are all like polyester. And I started seeing these
mm,
crazy reports about the levels of, forever chemicals and phthalates and BPA and stuff that are in particular around the like crotch region of those pants. And how that is such a, your skin obviously is very, like it absorbs a lot already. But like that area in particular is very sensitive, and you're talking about introducing plastic, like basically directly into the tap, into your bloodstream. And it's like, there's just so many sources of that. And you shouldn't, if you can and you can afford it and you have the desire to, then clothes shouldn't be one of those sources, if possible. Plus it also allows you, to be able to like connect freely with the earth as well, and not have that like blocking,
mm. Yeah.
anti-conductive kind of fabric. So
Yeah, you word that super well. I mean, with accessibility, that is for sure an aspect. And so if budget is an issue and like local proximity, I would definitely encourage people to go on Poshmark. It's this really great thrifting app, and I thrift a lot of things on there that are natural fiber. And you can actually, like, if something is out of your price range, you can actually request for a certain number that the what the seller can agree on. And so you can actually kind of barter. And I think it's a
That's
great option
cool.
for people. Yeah, it's really nice. It's a really great app. But yeah, on all avenues of what you just said, of like it being so bad for your body and your skin, but also like disconnecting you from the earth, and and it's so cheap. So I think that like conspiracy wise, it's kind of like it's coming at us from all angles in that way of why polyester clothing exists. Like it's so cheap, slave labor, disconnecting you from the earth. It's what it's doing to your body. So overall, like, our mind is very powerful. And I was actually talking to a homeopathy practitioner the other day who was saying that she's not really that concerned about polyester clothing because she understands the power of the mind, which,
Hmm.
I totally hear and align with as well to a certain extent. But like, I also at the same time, like, I'm not just going to go drink tap water knowing what's in there. Do
Right.
I believe that our minds and bodies are powerful? Of course. But like, do I love biohacking and German new medicine and quantum health? Yeah. So I think having a balance of like not being super, super stressed out about all these things, but doing what you can and weaving it what you can is so important. And like I said, I am a very like personality or perfectionist, like Gemini type person and go getter. So I think I tend to be like pretty extreme about things. But if that's not healthy for someone, then, just definitely just integrate what you can. But again, I think maybe you're probably like this too. It's like when you hear truth, it's very hard to not hear it and not see it anymore. So
Yeah.
it doesn't even have to be this, it doesn't feel like this stressful thing to me. It just feels like a natural shift back to my goal of wanting to be as close to the earth and myself as possible.
Right, right. Yeah, I think that as soon as that door is opened where you start to learn some things, it's very difficult to not see that everywhere and to not have it, like I'm like going to a family reunion in June, and I was
Mhm.
just like talking with my husband about this, about like what are we going to eat while we're there? Like we're going to have to, go grocery shopping to buy some kind of like staples, because otherwise we'll end up going out to restaurants and things where they cook everything in seed oils.
Mhm.
And I mean, like, I think that there's a balance to that. Like, I feel like, like kind of like what you were just saying, our bodies are resilient and they are very, very good at healing themselves when you have them in an environment that is conducive to balance most of the time. Right. So like if the way that I live, like 90% of the time, with like being outside pretty often and grounding pretty often and like eating really nutritionally dense foods, getting good sleep, wearing blue light blockers. I'm wearing my like daytime blue light blockers right now. I've got another
Mhm.
pair that are like amber colored that I wear at night, and like using red lights and things like that. Like if you're doing all that kind of stuff like 90% of the time, and then you end up, needing to go out to a restaurant where you're like not entirely sure what type of oil the food was cooked in, it's probably going to be okay. Um,
100%. Yeah.
and like, I think that I was just having a conversation about this actually with somebody the other day about how like anything can become very obsessive if you let it become obsessive, and not in the way that like you were describing of being obsessive, where like I don't consider that to be obsessive, but more like motivated, like drive.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
which to me, the difference is in how it's affecting you internally. So like obsessive
Yeah.
is having a negative effect of having a very judgmental feedback loop of like, if I don't do this, then something bad's going to happen, or if I don't do this, then I'm like a bad person or whatever. Whereas like the motivated side of things is like, I know, therefore I can do better, right? And it's all
Mhm.
about choosing that perspective of not being obsessive about it, but recognizing that the body is resilient and just doing as much as you can, as often as you can, for what you have control over.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're definitely on the same page with that. I think that's just such a healthy approach. And yeah, just understanding that underlying like stress is one of the biggest issues. So if you're eating the healthiest diet and you're doing all the things right, if your nervous system is racked, then you're not really doing that much for your
Right.
body. So
Right. Yeah, you could be eating the healthiest diet in the whole world, but if you're super stressed all the time, that it's not gonna be doing much for you, honestly.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Which is, part of one of the things I wanted to talk about today actually was the idea of like stress and frequency, and
Mhm.
and, hormone health and how all of those things affect our bodies. And I realized that, for people listening, we should probably define exactly what quantum health means, what that actually
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. So there's a couple doctors out there that talk about quantum health, and one of them is Dr. Jack Cruz. So I'm actually not sure what his definition of it is. So I would encourage your listeners to go look at the exact definition. But how I take quantum health, I mean, just the quantum in general, for anyone that's not familiar with just quantum health in general, it's very interesting because a lot of it goes beyond time and space because we're working in the worlds of frequency. So light frequencies, earth frequencies, thought patterns. It kind of gets in the conversation of parallel universes or parallel timelines. And this can seem very woo woo for some people, but the last Nobel Prize, or maybe it was one before, was about quantum entanglement. And
Hmm.
so we're really starting to discover how working in the quantum is really important. So in terms of what most doctors are talking about when they talk about quantum health, they're talking about frequencies and earth frequencies and how they're playing a role in our health. For example, when you listen to quantum health practitioners speak about food being local and that how it's affecting our mitochondrial health, or swimming in electrons in the ocean in structured water, what that's doing for our mitochondrial health and our bodies, or what the sun is doing for our bodies. Um, I think I already said this example, but getting outside, creating that structured water. Kira taught me about easy water and how basically when you are grounding outside, it creates structured water inside your body. So actually, when you drink structured water, it's very different than getting outside and the electrons on your body and how
Right.
that's your body creating its own structured water. So um, and so that's a little bit different than actually the whole quantum mindset aspect. The whole mindset aspect of working with your thoughts is basically very similar to manifesting. There's this quote that says, the secret to believing the secret to having everything you want is believing that you already do and being in that frequency. And I think a lot of us these past few years, we're really in a position where you were either in deep, deep fear or you were in love. And I think that there's this splitting of people of fear and sickness and truth and vibrancy and health. And so kind of speak a little bit more in depth on this. I feel like when I started diving into true things and the water and what was going on, it put me in a deep sense of fear. And I was just living in constant fear. My nervous system was wrecked. It was wrecked for a couple other things too, from trauma, but it was really wild how trauma led me to being in fear of the world and fear of just all my surroundings. And then the past few years happened, and I kind of woke up to how people being in fear is the exact problem.
Hmm.
And so to be out of that, speaking in the quantum, then you can actually, again, that quote, the secret to having what you want is believing that you already have it all, and living in that frequency and physically and scientifically changing the frequency of your body and your thoughts.
Hmm.
And I had this teacher in college who one day, one of our assignments was to track all of our thoughts for the day. And it was so challenging. It was very
Interesting.
hard, but it was tracking all of your negative thought patterns. And people came in with lists and lists and lists, and you don't even realize what's going on in your subconscious and how poorly you're talking about yourself, and then how that affects your health in the quantum, because it's literally having such a hormonal signaling in your body and in so many different ways. So, when I think of the quantum, I think of just really being face to face with our thoughts and the way we live our lives and our fears and scarcity, and facing that so we can have a actual upgrade of frequency. And I think a lot of people again think that's a woo woo, but it's so science based.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I remember a couple years ago having my first introduction to someone that was talking about upgrading your vibration and
Mhm.
doing things like reaching a state of higher vibration, right? And this person was, describing themselves as like a light worker and like that I'm sure you're familiar with that particular realm of people. And I remember at the time I was like, this sounds
Mhm.
real woo woo, right? And I was
Yes.
like, I don't know about that. I love the idea, like it's really interesting how most people probably would have the same reaction, that they love that idea. That sounds really like, beautiful, that you could change your vibration to become a being of love rather than one of fear, and anger. And that's like, that idea is very resonant with people, but a lot of people are like, okay, but how does that work at like an actual scientific level? I need
Mhm.
something to tie me back to the physical so that I can, believe this rather than thinking that it's just woo woo. Right. And I
Mhm.
remember like,
Mhm.
as I've gone more down the rabbit hole, I guess, so to speak, of like learning about all this stuff, like it really makes complete sense how everything is electricity and everything is electrical signals, including your brain. And your brain is full
Mhm.
of neurons that are firing electrical signals across synapses that are connecting different things together, making your muscles work, making you blink your eyes, and all kinds of things. So like, when you're thinking a specific set of thoughts, it actually really does make a lot of sense that like positive thoughts would have a certain effect on the electrical signals that are being fired in your brain, versus negative
Mhm.
thoughts, and how those are probably a different frequency, a different, like, well, I mean, they definitely are, but they
Definitely.
have a different effect on your body because of the way that our bodies work as, beings of electricity. And so when you think about it that way, from like what's the basis in the physical, it
Mhm.
becomes feels a lot less woo woo, um, and seems a lot more, having a basis in reality. And I just also wanted to add on that you mentioned easy water, and for anybody listening, that's exclusion zone water, right? That's what the acronym stands for, I think.
I believe so, yeah.
And it is, so that's something for people to look up if they're interested in it, but it's basically describing the structured water that's on the outside of our cells. And that's
Like
kind of,
gel.
it's like a, like a liquid crystal gel type structure that is,
Yeah.
due to the fact that we have like lipids on the outsides of our cells, and the way that water structures, in order to interact with the fat layer. So that's,
Mhm.
something to look into. I actually watched your, or no, you were in it, but I think it was somebody else. It was,
Dr. Catherine Clinton.
yeah, Dr. Catherine Clinton. I had listened to that episode that she did, or that 1 hour long webinar or whatever, and that was really
Amazing,
interesting. Yeah, it was
right?
really amazing, interesting hearing her talk about the difference, like you said, between. I'm really glad someone asked the difference between drinking structured water versus the type of structured water that's actually in our bodies, and how, just because you're drinking structured water doesn't actually mean that it is creating structured water inside of your body, because
Mhm.
it's a different type of structure. And I thought that
Absolutely.
that was really fascinating too. That was part 1 of episode 2 of the In Search of Sovereignty podcast, featuring Carly Rose. If you enjoyed this, please keep an eye out for part 2, which will be posted next week. You can find me on social media under @sovereignty.pod, and you can find Carly under @rewildcarlyrose. Don't forget to check the show notes for links to all the things we discussed in this podcast. As always, thank you for listening, and see you next time.